Hello, and welcome to Copy That, the series from Quadcast that's all about copywriting. I'm your host, Lewis, and today I'm joined by Anne East to talk all things copy. Anne, thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be invited. It's a really novel experience for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm so excited for our conversation. It's doing these episodes has always been really fun because it's, interviewing copywriters. I think we kind of are like introverts that sort of masquerade as extroverts. So
Yeah,
actually getting to talk about yourself for an hour is a really fun experience. That's kind of like
absolutely.
what other time is there to sit and talk about yourself and not feel like you're rambling on and on? This is the purpose of this. I want to hear all about you. So, I'm just going to get started with the first question that I ask everybody, which is, how did you get into copywriting?
Oh, well, I came into copywriting. It was quite a circuitous route. So I was always interested in journalism, and I managed to wangle some work experience at Cosmopolitan magazine,
Oh, wow.
which I don't know if that exists anymore. This was obviously a long, long time ago. So I did work experience there, in their fashion department, and I thought, this is great. It's a fantastic experience, but I don't know if I can write about fascinators and blouses for the rest of my life. And they actually introduced me to the concept of buying. So I had no idea that you had retail buyers. I mean, obviously, it's obvious when you think about it. Obviously, all the stuff in shops needs to be bought by somebody. So I looked into that and ended up going into retail buying, which I did for about 10 years. Then I eventually took voluntary redundancy, became a web author for my local authority, and the rest is history, I guess. That's how I became a copywriter.
Oh, fantastic. So it was kind of like a really it's quite similar to a lot of other stories that I've heard where like I came in through like a humanities degree route and then kind of stumbled into copywriting from there. But I mean, yours is it's zigzags and it's like
Yeah.
fitting this massive puzzle piece together to where you are now. So what do you do now? Do you work freelance? Do you work in-house somewhere? What do you do?
So I'm freelance. So I've pretty much, since I left my local authority, because that was only a contract role, I've been freelance. So that's been 10 years now. I've been freelancing. So it's a long time. It feels like a long time. So yes, that's been interesting. And it's obviously had its ups and downs, lots of downs, but it's good because obviously you have freedom to kind of, work when you want to work, and you can fit things around. I've got 2 children, and actually when I became freelance, it kind of coincided with them being quite small. So actually it was perfect. And obviously as they've got older, they need me less, so I can dedicate more time to the copywriting. But it's been good having that flexibility. Now I look at parents who sort of go to work in offices or have to go to a place of employment, and you just think, I don't know actually how they do it, balancing leaving for work, coming home from work, childcare, school hours. The day is not that long and it's quite difficult. So I do admire parents that have to physically go out of the house to work. I work from home, obviously. So yeah, it's been good from that perspective.
I'm childless, so I don't know how any parent does it without completely losing their mind anyway. So, my partner's sister has 5 children, and it's like
Wow.
it's an art. Like you walk into her house, and it's just there's this army of children that are just there
Yeah.
constantly. I'm like, how are you standing upright?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because my sister's got 3 children, and they're a bit younger than ours, and her youngest has just started school. And it's just, it's hard when I go to hers, because you forget, because my kids are teenagers now, so you kind of forget the chaos that is when you have very young children. You can't leave anything because it will just get moved or trashed, or it's just yeah.
Yeah, it's not an experience that I envy, but I know that it's coming for me. So it's hearing everybody's stories and getting panicky about it, but I'm sure it's just
It'll be fine.
the good
It'll be
outweighs the bad. It's
fine.
it's great. So what was the decision making process for going freelance? Was it the contract ended and you just thought, yes, this is what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pursue it, or was there someone that kind of encouraged you to do that? How did you fall into freelance?
So I always knew, so the contract was for 12 months and the children were very young, and my husband's also self-employed. So he was just like, do you know what, why don't you just try it for a bit, see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, then, obviously go back to look for full-time employment. Because when you're in buying, it's a great job. It's a fantastic job. And in lots of ways, it was a really weird job for me to go into, because it's quite social. You have to be quite outgoing. You do have to be a bit of an extrovert. And I'm none of those things, not really. And it was always, you kind of always have to be on, and it's quite tiring. It's exhausting. And it's a lot of relationship building. So you have your suppliers and you build relationships with them. So it was quite difficult to find to fit that kind of job in with family life, I guess. So I managed to pick up some freelance work with an agency, writing for a very large comparison website. They now have their own in-house team, but back then they didn't. So I was writing content for them, and I was churning out 10, 12, 15 articles a week for them. And it was just, when I look back, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I did end up working sort of weekends, in the evenings, things like that. But I suppose, that's what you kind of do to build up your freelance business. And it really just stemmed from there. So from that, I obviously then had a portfolio, which I could then, go and market to other people. And that's really how it started. And I haven't really stopped to kind of consider if I need to do anything, because it's just kind of happened, I suppose, which does make me very fortunate. Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the fact that I've obviously had continued work for the last 10 years, but yeah, no, it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, 15 to 20 articles a week, that is a heavy workload. But
Yeah.
when you look at it from this perspective of, at least you've then got this fantastic portfolio that you can go out with, and you can shop that around, that then makes it all the better and makes the work completely worth it. There's a great, for people that have been listening to all of these episodes, there's been probably half of the episodes that I keep talking about the fact that I'm rereading Barbara Streisand's autobiography. And there's a great quote in there where she was told by a friend, or she read in a book, I can't remember the exact source, but she says, at the moment of commitment, the universe conspires to help you. So it's that great sort of approach of, yes, I'm going to commit to this, and then everything will fall into place really nicely. So yes, like 15 to 20 articles a week is a hell of a lot of work. I don't know how you did that with children, especially. that is mad. But at least, you've been able to like build your freelancing career, and you've been able to build your self-employment journey from that, which is, really worth self-applauding for. So well done. So I imagine it was you have to go and learn on the job sort of situation when you did go freelance and start copywriting. Would I be right in thinking that?
Yeah, so my degree was in English linguistics and literature. So I had a kind of, I suppose, a foundation in English, as in, like, I knew how the language worked, all about syntax, grammar, all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, essentially learning to do copywriting, I had to, learn it on the job, I guess. Yeah. But I think having that background of having an English degree, and also doing quite sort of analytical subjects at A-level, where there's a lot of essay writing, you kind of, it's obviously a different type of writing, but it does give you that foundation of, how to plan something, how to execute something, how to lead people through like a story, I guess. So yeah, and then other than that, it was just learning on the job.
I find it really interesting, your point of it being a story. So my degrees were in film studies, and then I did a master's degree in screenwriting. So for me, it's always been about how can you infuse narrative into any kind of piece that you're writing. And, I don't do it with every piece, because not every piece calls for it. But I like this idea of, let me write in a 3-act way where we need to get from point A to point B to point C in as succinct a way, and as in an engaging and an entertaining a way as possible. And I know that doesn't work for everybody, because everybody's kind of got their own specific niches and industries that really work well for them. So I'd love to know, have you specialised in any kind of particular niche or industry, or do you think of yourself as a generalist?
I like to think of myself as a generalist, and I've written about all sorts of things, but I do find that the majority of things I'm asked to write is about insurance and regulated services. So insurance, personal finance, all the really fun stuff. But that just seems to be how I don't know. I don't think I pitch myself as that necessarily. I think I have more so recently because I think it's easier for people to grasp what you do if you say you write about something specific. But I would say I'm a generalist. So I've written about things like cryptocurrency, I used to write personal finance stuff for the Motley Fool because they had like a personal finance section a few years ago. Things like that. But I've written about retail. So I did something on ERPs, so enterprise resource planning systems and document automation, all sorts of things. They all tend to be quite dry, I guess. But yeah, so insurance seems to be the thing I write about most. Pet insurance, home insurance, landlord insurance, car insurance,
If you've written for one, you've written for them all. We do work with some clients that work in the insurance space. And for the life of me, it always takes me 2 attempts to correctly spell the word insurance because I always get, it's ISN that I always end up writing every time. And no matter how many times I can acknowledge it, I can sit here and say, this is the problem, let me work on it. Never going to happen. It's always going to be spelt wrong.
Yeah. I know. For me, it's the R and the N. So I put the N next to the R. So it's obviously something about that word.
It's a tricky word. It's like I think because it's all over the place on the keyboard, but it's kind of all in the middle. It's, and I'm a very a very fast typer, I should say. So, it's just trying to spell it correctly every time. I get it wrong, but that's okay because I know that I've got a problem. The first step is admitting that you have the problem.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know, obviously, misspelling insurance aside, how will you usually get started on a piece of copy? Do you like to sit and plan? Do you like to sit and brainstorm? Do you like to just dive straight in? Do you like to research for forever and a day? What do you like to do?
So I always, if there is a brief, then I always make sure I read that properly and make sure I understand what the intention is. I've got one client who's very good with their briefs, so they're usually very detailed. If they haven't put down sort of pain points, I try and understand, based on the intention, what the pain points are for the reader, which can help you decide what kind of headers to use if they haven't been suggested already. So that's really how I go about it. And then I go and research. I like to read around a subject, even if it's a subject I've covered lots of times before. I'd like to go away and look at it with fresh eyes. Sometimes when you're going through a brief, it's really obvious what you need to do. So I've recently just written a piece about insurance. It's about flood insurance and escape of water and what the differences are. And sometimes it's really obvious, so you need to explain what the differences are between them. And the header will just scream at you that you need to explain this. And then sometimes it's a bit harder. So if I'm writing about underinsurance, for example, if I'm writing about underinsurance, we all know that underinsurance is bad because you get less money. But, if you dig a bit deeper, like, why is that bad? Why do you get less money? And, there are sort of weird insurance rules like the average clause. So your insurer can actually reduce the amount of money they give you by the amount you're underinsured by. So actually you get even less than you were if you were just underinsured. So it's understanding things like that and telling the reader so that they understand the reasons behind this. This isn't just some kind of arbitrary rule that if you're underinsured, that's it. That there are contractual things in place, that kind of dictate how these things work. So it's kind of, I suppose, leading the reader through these different points so that at the end of the article, the end of the guide, they think, oh, actually, okay, I know what I need to look out for when I'm choosing my insurance policy, for example. I need to be aware of X, Y, and Z. And then hopefully that enables them then to make a decision based on all the information rather than just saying, yeah, job done, I've clicked on that comparison site and bought my policy. But actually, you don't know what's in that. You don't really understand it. So I like to understand what the intention is, read around the subject, and then write.
Fantastic. You work in a very similar way to me where it's just trying to make sure that you're really understanding what it is that the point of this piece is. Because I think something that I've kind of come to realize through doing this series is that copywriters really do have quite an important influence on where somebody will go and get their car insurance from, where somebody will go on holiday next, what kind of, I don't know, tins of beans somebody's going to buy, whatever it might be. People really do lead with emotion. And if you can make sure that you're able to emotionally engage your audience, even if it's not, say, a sexy industry like insurance or, finance. People do lead with, yes, this piece, it made me laugh, or it made me feel I didn't feel like spoken down to because of the intelligence of the piece. It's, we do have a great sort of influence within our writing, and that to me is quite a powerful thing. And I think this is also part of the reason I love doing this series, is because for me, it's like, yes, am I suffering with delusions of grandeur because I think that my piece is about insurance and making, maybe, but also it's like, it's just that great opportunity to actually sit and applaud ourselves because, yes, we do important work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's funny because when I do research about insurance and other regulated services, it's all written, in a very dry, boring way, and I'm not saying that when I write about insurance, it's fun and, dynamic, there is something, you can't make insurance fun and dynamic, it is what it is, but it's about, using language that people understand. It's not about patronizing people, but it's explaining how things work, explaining what these choices mean. And in reality, people do need to balance, affordability with kind of levels of protection. And they need to understand that sometimes you need to choose, and they need to be fully informed about what those choices entail. So it is important. So yes, I suppose maybe I do suffer from delusions of grandeur about the importance of insurance copywriting.
I think I retract delusions of grandeur from the statement. I think it's just really understanding that what we do actually really is important. Like that is, I think there is such significance to the work that we do. And, it's, say like with writing for insurance, for example, we're writing these pages for John and Jane that live down the road. We're not writing it for, an ultra famous person that hasn't got the time or care to, figure out their own insurance. It's somebody on a day-to-day basis that's doing their own administration every day of the year. So it's just trying to communicate as quickly and as, positively exactly what the pros of going with this company are, or why you shouldn't go with another company, or whatever it might be. It's just trying to communicate that effectively, quickly, concisely, and, just to the average working person.
Absolutely. And sometimes, sometimes it is hard because actually when you read some sites, there's a lot of words, and I'm a huge believer of don't use 15 words when 10 will do. But who are you trying to impress? Are you trying to show people how clever you are by using all these complicated words and really long sentences? Or our job, I suppose, is to make things, like you say, clear and simple and easy to understand without talking down to people.
Yeah, exactly so. And I think one of the things that I can struggle with sometimes is, it's that ever-present threat of writer's block. And I'll find that sometimes I can be sat, whether it's writing for insurance or whether it's sat writing for manufacturing or education or whatever sector it might be that I'm writing for that day. I find that there's nothing more intense, nothing more threatening, nothing more panic-inducing than a blank Google Doc. So I'd love to know, what do you do and what kind of measures will you take if you find that you've started on a piece, you've done all of the research, done all of the planning, and the words just aren't landing on the page? There's just kind of nothing there. What do you like to do?
So I usually say, the problem is I'm a terrible procrastinator. So I do like to procrastinate, and therein lies some of the problem. But if I'm struggling, then I just have to stop what I'm doing because you can just stare at that page for as long as you like. The words aren't miraculously going to jump on there. So I usually stop and go and clean something. I find cleaning, just because you're not thinking about anything, you're just kind of doing it. So, there's nothing like cleaning the toilet or mopping the floor for getting inspiration. It's just
something that's just going to completely take your mind away from just something else. I was having a bit of my partner had a bad day at work yesterday, and he'd got some friends over to try and comfort him, and it was stressing me out hearing about it for the third time. So I went, I'm going to go and clean the kitchen because I just need to get away, and it calmed me right down. It was amazing.
There is something very soothing about wiping down a worktop, or
there really is. I cleaned the toaster, and that felt like a real achievement. That was like a real.
That's some serious cleaning. That.
I pulled out the the thing where all the crumbs go and wiped that, and it was great.
That's good going.
It's it's sad the things that make me happy now, but whatever
It's
it
the little
takes.
things in life.
Yeah, it's the little things in like having a clean crumb tray that make life worth living.
Absolutely.
So within your copywriting work, how often are you happy to sit and edit something or rewrite something before you're happy and you're happy that the client is also happy?
So I am really boringly methodical about the way I write. So I write in quite a linear fashion. So I'll start with the title. I'll agonize over the introduction, which is, I find, the hardest.
It's
The
the worst
introduction
part.
so hard because you have to make it interesting but to the point, and then lead the reader on further so they want to read further. So I do work in a very logical manner. So I will work on a paragraph or a sentence until I feel it is right, and then I'll just edit as I go. So by the time I get to the end of the article, it's pretty much there. And then I tend to let it rest for a bit. So I'll leave it. If I finished it, I'll leave it, go away for a few hours, or better yet, I'll come back the next day if I've got time, and then I'll reread it. And then I use the read aloud function in Word, because you can hear then the flow and the pace of the piece of writing. Because sometimes a sentence might sound really clunky when it's read out loud. And also it shows up those spelling mistakes and typos that you might not necessarily spot. Something might actually be a real word, but it's the wrong word in that setting. So I tend to do that. But Microsoft Word, the kind of read aloud voices, so they were really good, like really natural. And now something's happened to my program where like they're really mechanical now. They've like gone back to how they were a few years ago. And it does sound like a robot is reading your content, which sounds awful. It really is. And I've tried to fix it. And it happened earlier this year, and it kind of just sorted itself out after a couple of weeks. And it's happened again. And people are saying, oh, it's because there's been some rollout of something and it's changed something. And I've done all the things that I think I should do, and it's still, all robotic and stuff. So I'm just going to have to plow through and be brave.
I can't say that I've ever used the read it back to me function. It's it just doesn't ever really occur to me. Which I think is actually a really fantastic idea that I think I might just steal from you. The only time that recently we kind of delved into, we made a YouTube video about Lilo and Stitch. And when I was writing the script for it, I was writing about the marketing campaign behind the 2002 animated film and how it was kind of interesting for the company at the time, and all sorts of other reasons. And I then had to, do the voiceover for this video, and then I had to listen to it back about 1 million times to make sure that I was, I sounded good and that I'd got the script right and everything right. And it wasn't until I heard it back that I realized, like, actually I've made some quite not major errors, but I've made some real errors here because I've missed out words, or I've just missed out the connective tissue. Yeah. Because either, I've skipped over it, or I've not included it in the script. And I was kind of just so mindlessly reading the script because I didn't want to be doing the voiceover. Yeah. And I really didn't want to be doing it. So I was just like, just get on with it and do it. And it was, 2 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. But, it was a great way for me to then go, right, okay, like, here are all of the things that I've missed. Here is what I need to go and add. Here's what I can go and do, and just get it done, and it's sorted. So yeah, there is clearly value within listening back to your own words rather than just reading them back. I'm not very good when it comes to Grammarly. I don't really like Grammarly a lot of the time because sometimes I find that it will give you weird suggestions, and it doesn't always give me suggestions that I necessarily agree with, so I just tend not to use it. Yeah. I'm
so glad you've said that. I'm so glad you've said that. Yeah. I completely 100% agree with you. I did actually have a client that insisted as part of the editing process that I would use Grammarly, and I was just like, okay. And I did share my concern exactly for those reasons that you've just given, and they were like, no, it's really important, da da da. So I was like, okay, fine, you're a client, you're paying for this at the end of the day. So I used Grammarly, and it would, like you say, come up with really odd suggestions. And the thing about grammar is that once you know the rules, rules, you can bend those rules so that you can express yourself in a way by using that punctuation and grammar to show how you feel in a more, I suppose, impactful way. But Grammarly kind of strips all of that out.
Yeah.
And I kind of explained my choice of, words or punctuation and versus the Grammarly. And that was fine. I mean, they kind of accepted that. But yeah, it's this weird kind of belief that these kind of tools are correct all of the time.
Which they're just simply not. It's the whole point of punctuation is to be emotive. It's to add the bits and pieces that are going to make the reader know exactly what the writer's intention are. And Grammarly just doesn't have that because it's this AI tool that thinks it knows everything, and it simply doesn't. The human language is far more nuanced than just
exactly
including commas every other place. So.
Yeah. I mean, Grammarly is basically just a bit of a job's worth. It's just these are the rules and you must stick to them. It's like, well, that's not always the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's fold your arms, sit there with a bad face. Like, well, what if I don't want to do what you want to tell me what to do?
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Like, why should I listen to you? I'm not going to. So I would love to know, is there a type of work that you do enjoy doing more so than others?
I like long form. So I like to research because I love being lost down rabbit holes and finding all sorts of interesting things. There's usually something interesting, even the driest of subjects. Although I'm currently writing about business rates relief, so I don't think there is in that topic. But, usually there is something, interesting. So things like, reasons why your car insurance might become invalidated if you do certain things. Or, I've recently written stuff about brewing equipment. I mean, who knew that all this stuff existed just to like brew beer, things like, words I'd never heard of, like lautering or lautering, and things like the mash tun and cleaning in place systems, all these things. It's a whole different world. And actually, that's one of the great things about being a generalist is that you find these different worlds that you knew nothing about. And it's really interesting. So like when I was writing about cryptocurrency, one of the things I did was like the language used in cryptocurrency. So things like a whale, like who knew a whale meant somebody that had loads of cryptocurrency? It's just yes, I know, it's bizarre, isn't it? And things like, fork, which is when the blockchain splits in two, or, going to the moon, which I think means like cryptocurrency is rising in value, stuff like that. So it's really interesting when you kind of look at all these different language subsets, the different meanings. It's fascinating, and that's why I like being a generalist, is that every day is different because you're immersing yourself in these different kind of worlds of stuff that you wouldn't normally come across.
Yeah, so it's all of these new colloquialisms that you never thought all this new verbiage that you just never would have thought that you would ever learn and didn't know was out there. I mean, that to me is always fascinating. We work with a couple of clients within the science sort of industry, and I mean, I am not science minded. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but it is always then fascinating to go, I don't have a choice here. I need to learn exactly what it is that I'm writing about. So that to me is also then really interesting because it's pushing yourself more so out of your comfort zone. You're able to then balance your own creative freedom with pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and making sure that you're happy, making sure that the client is happy. And so from that point, I would love to know, how are you able to balance your own creative freedom and your own creative license while still making sure that you're meeting the client brief?
So it's a really good question, actually. So work as in writing for clients is writing for clients. And, most of them have like a tone of voice that you need to stick to and stuff. But when it comes to writing in my own voice, actually, that's quite hard. I don't know if that's because I've done it for so long that you kind of forget what your voice is like because you're writing for so many other people. I did write a book. It was published in 2021, and it was published by a great little Scottish independent publisher, and it was part of a series of books. Actually, the strapline was like big ideas, in pocket sizes. So they were just like 20,000 word kind of essays.
Yeah.
And I wrote about culture and identity, which is something I'm really passionate about. And it was quite difficult sort of sitting down to write about it, because also one of the things when you find your own voice, it's quite exposing. You feel quite vulnerable because you're not writing in somebody else's voice, which is what the day job is all about. You have to kind of dig deep and find your own personality and your own voice, and be willing to have people not agree with you, I suppose. And that was quite difficult, but it was good, and I'm glad I did it. But it is difficult. I think it's something I'm trying to do more of by finding my voice again. I used to have, when the children were very small, when I first started writing, I used to have a blog called Mummy's Always Tired, which I think is still floating around in the ether somewhere. But it was all about, having small children and basically how tired I just was all of the time, because I obviously eventually went back to work full time when they were quite little before I went freelance, and it was all about that. And I stopped because, again, it's that kind of level of exposure where you're being quite honest. And I wrote a blog post, and my father-in-law emailed me to say, "Are you okay? I read your blog post and I was just a bit concerned about you." And it was really sweet. It was really sweet. It's really lovely that he felt that concern. But I thought after that, oh dear, I don't know if I want, and after I'd written it, I was absolutely fine, but I just thought, that's you feel very vulnerable, I suppose, when you write from your own perspective and your own feelings, because people love to trample on that, don't they?
Yeah, massively so. And it's, when it's something so deeply personal as, obviously, once again, not being a parent, especially not being a mother, I can't speak to that experience whatsoever. But I imagine it, sharing that experience is one of the most vulnerable things that you can do, because yes, you're like inviting people to come and read it, and it's that acceptance of, you're probably also inviting criticism of the things that you're writing as well at the same time, which is it must be an incredibly tough sort of concept to grapple with, especially when it's something that's a new experience for yourself, as well as trying to make sure that you're feeling creatively fulfilled by writing out these articles and blogs all about your experiences with motherhood. And for me, it's things like, obviously it's not a comparable sort of situation, but it's doing things like film reviews and using Letterboxd as a platform, and using Twitter within like the film Twitter world. Whatever opinion you might have, you're inviting criticism of that opinion, and that is then quite a disheartening thing, because you think, well, say if there's a film that you really loved that has got really, really awful reviews, you're inviting people to laugh at you because you loved this thing that's been really poorly reviewed. And it's just an interesting sort of concept of like, is this opinion worth putting out, and is the criticism worth my own sanity?
Yeah, do you know, that's a really good point. I think, now we've got all of these tools. We all have all these tools at our disposal where we can share our opinions. And you're absolutely right. People love to crap on other people's views, don't they?
Yeah.
And I always think, if you don't have anything nice or constructive to say, just keep your mouth shut. It's not that hard. It really isn't. But don't worry about the bad taste. I mean, I love the Alien versus Predator franchise, which is terrible, which has obviously been universally panned, but, monsters fighting each other. I mean, what? Can't get any better, surely.
Alien versus Predator is great. Anybody that says otherwise is lying, it's great. I love that first Alien versus Predator film.
Yeah,
so good. It's great. And
what more could you want?
What more could you possibly want? So yeah, stop your bloody moaning and enjoy Alien versus Predator. So I want to move on to something that's a little bit of a meaty subject now, and I love to ask this question to all of the copywriters that come on this series, because everybody's kind of got similar opinions, and so but it's always just interesting to hear everyone's perspective on that similar opinion. And so I'd love to know what your sort of takes on AI tools within copywriting are.
So personally, I don't use AI tools to write, because that's not what people are paying me for. They're paying me to bring my human experience to writing things for other people. Obviously, we just mentioned I've been used to ask I've been asked to use editing tools, which I'm not averse to. People do use editing tools. That's fine. I tend not to use them generally. So no. So I don't personally use AI to write. I do find it frustrating that people now feel that AI as a tool enables them to write things they probably wouldn't have been able to write. So, there's a great, I don't know if you're a Reddit fan, I often lose myself down Reddit rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And there's a copywriting subreddit, and it's hilarious. It's brilliant. And it's full of people who want to learn to do copywriting. And, they've clearly generated, and it's usually email copywriting that they seem to want to get into. So they've written something blatantly using AI, the landscape is changing, all of that sort of gubbins.
Yeah.
And, they've used a very kind of, it all sounds the same. And it frustrates me that people look at this and think, oh, do you know what? This tool is going to make me an amazing copywriter, because they think it's going to do all the work for them, when actually writing is a massive skill. I mean, I can count, but I'm not an accountant. It's just because you can read and write doesn't mean that you can use that reading and writing to explain something to somebody else. Like, I'm really rubbish at sort of articulating things like verbally. Give me a pencil and paper. Oh my God, I could write you an essay on how I'm feeling, but getting me to explain to you how I'm feeling, I don't even go there. It's a very different skill, and it does kind of frustrate me that people are using these tools to enable them to do something that they probably shouldn't do. Which sounds like I'm gatekeeping. I'm not gatekeeping. Obviously, if you want to be a copywriter, be a copywriter, but so I don't use it to write. I do sometimes use it to generate ideas for my own marketing. So, for example, if I want to write some LinkedIn posts, I might say things like, why do business owners not like writing their own content? And it will throw up, a list of 10 reasons. And actually, that's quite a good place to start for marketing. But I did use ChatGPT in a different way yesterday. I actually used it so it was quite late in the day, and I was writing about farm business income, if you will. And there was a really good chart on gov.uk, but they started talking about, and I knew what it was saying, and I knew how I wanted to write it, but it was talking about ratios, and it was late and my brain was a bit foggy. And so I cut and pasted that into the AI thing and said, right, can you explain what this is trying to say? And it did. And it just kind of validated what I'd written. So that was the first time I used it in that respect. I suppose it was quite good because obviously I don't have any colleagues. So I can't say to someone, can you just read this and double check I've got the right idea? So in that respect, the machine was great because it did that job, So that was, I'd not done that before, but actually now I know that it kind of works like that. I can use that, but no, I don't use it to write. So yeah, so I don't know how you feel about AI now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in the same lane as you. For me, it's like I don't think it belongs in any kind of creative industry. I like to use it for idea generation. I like to use it for research. Sometimes I like to do it for a spell check and a grammar check. But again, it's as we said with the Grammarly discussion, it's not always going to suggest the best things, because the best it can do is predict what word is going to come next in a sentence. It's not able to, bring any sort of nuance or emotionality to anything. So yeah, it's a hot debate. I think for me, it's not something that I don't like reading AI generated content anyway. I don't like looking at it. I don't want to listen to it. I don't want any of that, because I want human perspective. I think in an age now, I think the more that I've been thinking about it, in a time now where, in the last 5 years, we've had COVID and we've all been locked in our houses for the longest time, we're kind of craving human connection more so than ever, because, more people work at home now than ever, and people are just like sat in their phones all the time, and people will replace big screen time for small screen time and vice versa. So I think people want to go out and they want to have that sort of connection with other people, whether that's through a blog post that someone's written, whether that's through a novel that's just come out, or a new album that's come out, or a podcast episode, whatever it might be. People are craving that sort of engagement, and that's not the kind of thing that can be fulfilled by some kind of AI generated mess of something.
No, you're absolutely right. It's so there was an article, actually, it wasn't that long ago, and I had to Google it just to make sure that it wasn't kind of some satirical piece of writing. But so there's this company that basically they have 5,000 different podcast shows, but every episode is generated by AI. So they've literally got thousands of shows, and every episode is generated by AI. So, and the CEO was sort of bragging that it costs like $1 or less to make per episode, and that even if they only had like 20 listeners, they would still turn a profit. And it's that kind of, and I think I posted something about it on LinkedIn, and someone actually said, and this was a really interesting point, which I hadn't thought of, they use it to generate their own podcast for them to listen to personally. So they might take something and then turn it into a podcast, and then they listen to it for their own personal use, which kind of makes absolute sense. It's the whole monetization, doing the human connection thing on the cheap, which is just a bit rubbish. But you're right, it's about connecting with people, isn't it? That's what you listen to, that sort of thing. It's not, and I think people really overestimate how good AI language tools really are. So there was another study, and they talked about model autophagy disorder. So it's about AI going mad. So obviously AI is trained on data, and the more data it has, the better. But the data that it's now scraping is really poor quality, because it's, and it's like a photocopier. So the more it kind of reads, every photocopy gets weaker and weaker. So it never generates anything new. It's literally repeating what's already in the system. So eventually you're just going to end up with gobbledygook. And I don't know whether people sort of realize that actually you're just regurgitating stuff that's already out there. You're not actually saying anything different. And we all know about the AI hallucination stuff, that there was one where some medical AI thing had actually made up a body part, and it was just like, what? How is this being allowed? It's bonkers. But the more you find out about it, like how much water it uses, for example, because the heat generated from every query that we put in there, how much water it uses, it's crazy, really. But and also the fact that we're not really paying for these services, but they're really expensive to run, these data centers. So it's going to get to a point where actually they're going to start charging, because it can't be free forever.
I remember, it's just the whole water usage point. I remember watching a video on probably Instagram or TikTok or somewhere, that just there's a town in Southern America somewhere where there's all of the AI data centers. This town doesn't have clean water because of this data center. So their tap water just constantly has dirt in it, and their bath water is yellow, and all of these things, because the clean water just isn't there, because it's being siphoned off to cool down these data centers and not actually going to people. So what are we prioritizing here? Are we prioritizing people, or are we prioritizing data? And the answer is obvious.
Yeah.
But why is that the case?
Yeah. I know. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's mad. And I think the sad sort of thing for me with AI is there's no, well, I say sad, but it's kind of the beauty and the greatness and the sadness of it all is that there's no one right answer. And I think it is like it's like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder sort of thing. If you think that AI is great because you use it for a certain aspect, for a certain tool, or for a certain project, another person's going to look at your usage of that and criticize it. So I think it's really easy for copywriters to sit and say, no, it's bad for copywriting, when another industry might say, yes, it's really good for this, but it's bad for this, whereas we might completely disagree with them. So it's what is the right way of looking at it. I don't think that I'm ever going to come around to a point where I think that it's good for copywriting. I think that AI generated copy is only ever going to replace bad copywriting. I don't think it's ever going to be a replacement for good copywriting. So as long as the standards that human copywriters are meeting are great, and that's all fantastic, then perfect. We're in the money, everybody's going to be happy, everyone's going to have clients for life. But the more that there's bad copywriting out there, and the more bad copywriting that AI tools are learning from, the worse the copywriting is going to get. And I have noticed in the last few months, it's not giving you the in the world of, in the landscape of, in the da-da-da-da of, because clearly people have said, stop doing this, and stop doing it. But, it has stopped doing that. So is it getting better? Maybe. But it could just be that it's getting more intelligible rather than getting less bad. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yes. I mean, of course, AI has its uses. Reading data sets. Understanding the things that we can't process quickly enough. That's what it should be used for. But you're right. It shouldn't be used for creating stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's to me, there's like this. There's the story about the AI actress that everybody in the Screen Actors Guild are kicking up, such a fuss about, which I, completely agree with. It's, people train for years and work so hard to be a screen actor. So it's the kind of, it's something that's going to affect all creative industries. And I don't think that people that aren't within them can understand it as much as the people that are within them, about why our opinions all seem to kind of meet in the middle really sort of nicely.
Yeah, and I think it's that whole thing where people have this perception that the creative work is somehow less work.
Yeah.
There is this kind of insidious belief that good work or clever work only comes from things like science or maths or technology, and creative work, whether that's writing or dance or acting or music, people very much think of, well, that's easy, that's just messing around, isn't it? It's like it's a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, exactly. You look at things like science, maths, all of the these core sort of subjects, we'll say, they might advance intelligence, they might advance understanding of societies and all sorts of things, but art impacts culture impacts society. So it's they're one in the same, they just have completely different reasons for being as significant as they are. So and the thing is, we can sit and wax poetic about all of these things and creative industries as much as we like, but I think what I find so reassuring is that the copywriters that I've met and spoken to through this series all have that same stance of creative industries need to kind of be protected, and creative industries, we need people working within them to make sure that the work is of a high standard, and that, people are being entertained and people are being engaged and that people are employed. That's another huge thing. It's, don't replace, a team of copywriters with one ChatGPT subscription.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you think of all the great, the great creative writing things that, things like, I'm not a creative copywriter, so I'm not like a slogan generator, I can't do that copywriting, but, stuff like that, it's brilliant. And you're never going to get a machine that comes up with that sort of stuff.
Exactly. And you just, you look at things like Jane Austen and Ernest Hemingway and all of these great writers, they didn't need, artificial intelligence assistance. They just had that great, they worked at their craft and they perfected their talent to the point that we're still talking about their work hundreds of years later. So it's, there's always going to be this argument of why there should be usage, and there's always going to be reasons why there shouldn't be usage. But when AI is literally just still in its infancy, I think it's still, to me, just kind of like some kind of fad, because it is the shiny new thing, in the same way that, like, I don't know, Siri was the shiny new thing when it was first, released. And, not that Siri was putting people out of jobs by any means, but yeah, there's always going to be that passing fad of each decade. And I wonder if these language models are the passing fad of this decade.
Yeah.
They very well could be. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much that can be said around this conversation. So, there's no one right answer. And, we're not here to fix AI usage today. We're not here to resolve that. We're not here to kind of give the answers. But it's just offering perspective to other people's arguments, because it is such a loaded topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. But, we'll park the AI conversation there and let's move on to another fun question.
Yeah, so I've just gone blur.
Yeah, it is a little bit. The problem with the AI question is it's a little bit word vomit, and you just want to get it all out. But it's like, it's like you want to sit there and give like a really, really, impassioned, sort of intelligent answer. But sometimes it's really hard to do that, especially.
It just seems like
Yeah.
It's
It's a tricky question. But anyway, moving swiftly on.
yeah.
So I would love to know, is there a writer, and it could be anybody from a songwriter, a screenwriter, copywriter, anybody that you particularly admire?
So I love the classics. So Emile Zola, Balzac, all of these like great writers, because it's all about human nature, human behavior, like human psychology, because actually people don't really change, like human behavior doesn't really change, and there's a great thing. So I love Agatha Christie, so Miss Marple and Poirot in particular. And it's great because with the whole Miss Marple thing, Miss Marple's, she lives in a village, tiny little English village, but she always says, if you live in a village, you know all the different types of people that there are, because actually you've got this little diaspora, about, all these kind of different behaviors, all in one place. And it's just really interesting that over time, so, like Emile Zola was writing about stuff, back then that still affect us now, like the way people behave, that kind of stuff. And it's the same with Shakespeare, like we've got things like, Shakespearean plays that the themes are still relevant. I can't think of the one that I wanted to mention, but
it'll come to you at the strangest time later.
Yeah, I know. But, all of these things are still relevant. Like you said, we're still talking about them. We're still talking about these classics, and we're still studying them. I've just finished Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, which I think was the basis for The Village of the Damned. And I've read some of his stuff before, but again, it's, really, he writes really simply, but just really, really beautifully. Like you can see and feel and sense everything. And Elif Shafak is another writer who, I don't know if you've read any of her stuff, but
I've read The Island of Missing Trees. I might have just butchered that title, but yes, I loved that.
Yeah, I read that in the summer, and it was beautiful. Like she's one of those writers that can sort of transport you to different places, and you can sort of see and smell what she's describing. And there was another one that she wrote. It was like 10 minutes, 38 seconds. And again, just really, really brilliantly written, just lovely, really evocative writing. And then I also read quite recently Sarah Wynne Williams, Careless People. So she was the former head of policy at Facebook.
Yes.
I don't know if you've read this.
Yeah, I've not read it, but I've got it in my because I like to listen to nonfiction rather than read it, so I've got it in my Audible wish list.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, like it's none of it surprising. Like nothing that she writes is a surprise. But it's the kind of calculated callousness that everything, is kind of happens. It's just fascinating. It really is. It's really well written. It's brilliant. So that's really, really good. Hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my next credit to come in, because that's the next one that I want to get after. I'm listening at the minute to oh god, what's her name? Kamala Harris's 107 Days. I think it only came out a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, that's been interesting so far. It's not great because she paints a very heroic picture of herself, which she is I do think that she has done some incredible things, but she does paint this picture of I don't know what I've done wrong. And it's like, well, you did a few things wrong, but it's okay. But yeah, no, it's I think with what I love to ask that question. I love everybody's responses to that, because you can tell so much about a writer based on the artists and the authors that they love and the books that they love, especially. Lately, I've not been reading a fat lot. I've been listening to a lot of nonfiction lately. So it's the Barbara Streisand book once again that I will once again mention. The Kamala Harris book. I have been reading as well Erotic Vagrancy, which is about the life and marriages of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And I can't think of the author. which is really annoying, but it's a fantastic read because it just kind of frames it as, here are all of that, here's their life, here are their, all of the key events in their relationship, and here are the things that kind of led up to that moment, and here are the things that are sort of ironic about the fact that this happened to them in real life based on characters that they played in films, and things that are known about them privately that aren't, things that have been released about them privately that aren't necessarily publicly known or aren't supposed to be publicly known. So it just frames it all in this incredibly interesting way, in their, failed love lives, failed marriages, and how it all led them to where they are and where they ended up going. So that's a fantastic book as well.
Yeah.
But once again, can't remember who the bloody author is. But fantastic nonfiction book there. But yeah, so I would then love to know, this question I think is a little bit odd, because sometimes I don't know why I'm asking it. I think I'm coming to that conclusion, because not everybody does like to listen to music while they write. I like to listen to a lot of like instrumental music just because I like to have something on in the background. And it kind of varies from day to day. Sometimes I like just kind of like classical piano. Sometimes I like a bit of jazz. Sometimes I like a film score. Really depends. Yeah. But I'd love to know, have you got any recommendations for things to listen to while you write? So what should we be listening to?
So I tend to write in silence, which my husband always, he always laughs at me, because he's just like, you just love silence, don't you? It's like, well, yes, because then I can hear all the voices in my head telling me what to write, It's just like, which makes me sound a bit, strange, but I'm not really. But if I do listen to music when I'm writing, which I do very occasionally, if I'm feeling a bit stuck, I do like the Bach cello suites. I've got those. And some Albinoni, these adagios, because they're a bit kind of slow and gloomy, and they're just quite good. But I went through a phase of listening to like rain, you get those kind of ambient sounds, soundtracks, like fire crackling and rain. And so I used to listen to one with like rain pattering down on like roofs and things. And that was quite good. It just kind of gets you into the mood for focusing. But it's funny because I went through my old sort of album playlist, and I used to listen to a composer. It's called Sammy Matter. I've got no idea how you pronounce his name, but he does a lot of sort of instrumental music for video games and things. I'm not a gamer, but his music's kind of a bit like if you were living in Blade Runner, that's what it would be like. It's kind of that kind of music. But otherwise I write in silence. And in terms of podcasts, I love Cautionary Tales by Tim Harford,
which I've not heard of.
Absolutely. So I think he started out as a journalist, and this podcast is brilliant because they are a bit like grim fairy tales for grown-ups. So it's kind of like things that we can learn from terrible things that have happened. So like there's one episode where there's this pilot, and he's got like a full plane, but he lets his kid fly the plane on autopilot, except the autopilot accidentally switches off, and it's like lessons we can learn from those kind of terrible things, but they're really good. And I love a history podcast. So there's like a history podcast called like Real Dictators, which is all about dictators, which is just really interesting. And there's one called Smoking Gun, which is also really good. So it's about like, they're based on like real life crime. The smoking gun is like the one clue that helps the police solve the crime. And that's really good as well.
Oh, fantastic. There's some great recommendations in there for most things that I've not actually heard of. So that's really cool. I struggle a lot of the time to then go, what's a good recommendation that I've been listening to this week of something that people have never heard of, and I always panic and just go, I've been listening to the Lord of the Rings score again. Like I've just had that on, but no, this week I have like this massive film scores playlist of I think there's currently about 4,000 tracks in there, because I'm not very good at picking and choosing what I like to listen to. I like to just have it all in there, but lately I've really, really liked the score, Alan Menken's score for the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Disney animated film. Not the songs that are sung, as much as I do like those, just his very sort of religiously very like, just very like church choir,
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. It can be kind of gothic at times. It's quite intense for a kid's film, but it's very heavily inspired by very kind of like religious aspects of religious music. And that to me is like
Yeah.
really very interesting because I'm not a religious person, but I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, that to me that's what I'm going to recommend this week is something everybody's heard of, The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I do know what you mean, though. Religion is fascinating as a topic. It's
Yeah.
a fascinating topic. Yeah, so I completely get that.
Yeah, it's just yeah. I mean, I've always like really enjoyed the film, and I really like the music, but that score especially is probably like the best one that he ever made for the Disney studio. So yeah, it's just a great. I feel very passionate about The Hunchback of Notre Dame today. I didn't realize I felt so passionately about it. So, Anne, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today and entertaining me for an hour. I really do appreciate you taking the time. And I just have one last question for you, which is time for some shameless self-promotion. I really hope you're feeling up for it. So just lastly, where can people find you and your work and all of your freelance work and anything else online?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm just Anne East on LinkedIn. And I have a website, which is called Black Stag Copy. I don't know why I came up with that name. Just thought it was quite cool at the time. It's very random, but there we go. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I just talked at you for an hour. So.
No, it's fantastic. It gives me something to respond to, like, because I'm going to go and sit now for the rest of my day and like sit with my headphones in and not talk to anybody until I go home. So it's going to be, well, that makes the office sound really antisocial. It's not, but I just got a lot to go and do this afternoon. So yeah, this has been like the perfect hour. Thank you so much. Just again, yeah, this has been amazing. And yeah, thank you so much everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time.